Chapter 16. As Neshoba hurried back to the den, he realized he should have investigated the elk for himself, considered the land to work out a hunting strategy, and decided which elk would be the easiest to take down. At the least, he should have counted them. Yes, his wolves would follow him. However, with Gorby's challenge, they would be watching and judging everything he did. He must be successful. The raven is right, he thought. Elk cows often leave their calves alone. With any luck, the calves will not go far. Neshoba tried to run faster. He found it difficult. Twice he had to stop and rest, but the more he rested, the more anxious he became. He must not let those elk get away. Chapter 17. As the old wolf moved out of the valley, the hurt in his front paw worsened. Working hard to ignore it, he maintained a steady pace, the better to save his energy. When he came within a mile of the pack den, he stopped and rested. He did not want to appear tired when he arrived. It was cooler at the higher altitude, a half-mile from the den. Tall lodgepole pine and spruce crowded the ground and shaded the dark green and fragrant air. The rocky earth was frozen in spots, often crusty with a brittle covering of dead patches. Patches of dirty snow dotted with pine needles lay at random. Nothing new was growing here, not yet. After sitting a while to regain some strength, his right front leg elevated to ease the pain, Neshoba lifted his head, filled his lungs with air, closed his eyes, pointed his muzzle up, and made an O of his mouth. Then he howled a long, deep, wavering wail that lasted a good 10 seconds. It rose and fell like a wave rolling across the sea. He was telling his pack of his return. After a brief pause, Neshoba repeated the call once and once again. Before he was done, there were answering calls, 5 distinctive howls, each one in harmony with his voice. His mate, Tonigan, had a higher-pitched call, full of excitement. Then came Garby's loud and full of bluster. Nikito sang out too, tentative at first, then stronger as the young wolf asserted himself. Pildown added his voice, sweet and melodic. Finally, Debalt, lowest in pack ranking, his short, almost barking howls sounded as if he were knocking on a door, asking to be let inside. The soft-eared pups were too young to howl, but Neshoba had no doubt they heard his howls and were letting loose with excited squeaks and whines. He gave a growl of satisfaction and resumed running faster now that he was close to home, paying no attention to his aching foot. Chapter 18. Casey's school day was over at 3. The students at the school, there were only 87, either walked, were picked up in cars, or were taken home by school bus. But the bus did not go as far north as Casey's house. Instead, Casey walked the short distance to the Clarksville General Store where his mom worked. The store was a long, one-story wooden building with a central doorway. 2 handwritten signs could be seen in a window. One read, "Open," the other, "Hunters Welcome Here." At one end of the building, groceries, meat, and vegetables were sold. An ice cream counter did well during the summer tourist months. At the opposite end was a liquor store. Between this and the general store was the Clarksville post office. Though the post office was only a small room plus an adjacent hall, it served as North Rickles County. Since there was no delivery north of the post office, people came in for mail, news, and talk. Next to the post office, which consisted of a large open counter, a cluttered workplace with a desk, scales, postal sack racks, cash drawer, and safe, plus stamp drawers, as well as a wall of postal boxes. You opened your small box door with a brass key. There were also a few tables and chairs, plus a couple of shelves where you could exchange books, mostly paperbacks. Another wall was covered with local notices. There was a sign that read, "Clarksville Post Office, established 1923. "Hi, Mom," Casey called as he approached. His mother looked up from her desk and smiled. "How's my teenager?" She was wearing her blue post office shirt on which she had embroidered "Postmaster, Clarksville" in red over her heart. "I'm good. Go find yourself a snack. I know it's your birthday, but you might as well get some homework done. You've got a busy weekend," she added with another smile. Casey replied with his own knowing grin. Chapter 19. When Neshoba reached the den, the wolves came forward to greet him in ranking order: Tonigan, Garby, Nikito, Pildown, and finally Debalt. They approached with tails respectfully low, then pushed their bodies against him with head and muzzle rubbing, as well as licking. While Garby avoided looking at Neshoba directly, Pildown dropped to the ground and whimpered. Debalt, as always, hung back, unsure he would be welcomed. The two pups burst from the den. They yipped and yapped as they tumbled clumsily toward their father, tails wagging ferociously. Though utterly disrespectful, Neshoba met their welcome with pleasure and no discipline, nuzzled them repeatedly, licked their faces, and nipped their soft ears. They responded by mouthing his jaw, again begging for meat, then plopped down, rolled on their backs, paws up, bellies exposed, all the while squealing with joy. Tonigan looked on with satisfaction. The wolves waited expectantly. Neshoba, wanting them to wait on him, took so much time that an impatient Garby burst out, "Well, did you find anything?" Neshoba looked at him disdainfully. "Of course," he said. "Where? What?" asked Nikito with his usual enthusiasm. Neshoba said, "A small herd of elk." "How many?" demanded Garby. "How far?" Nikito asked. Neshoba chose to answer Nikito's question. "Down valley, about 8 miles. 8? said Tonigan. "It will be dark before we reach them," said Garby. "The moon will be good enough," Neshoba replied. "If the weather holds," said Garby. Neshoba ignored the challenge in the young wolf's remarks. "We'll go now. Debalt, you stay with the pups." Proud to be given an important task, but disappointed not to be included in the hunt, Debalt lowered his head in obedience. "Garby!" Neshoba commanded. Garby approached cautiously. Neshoba lifted his left paw and, in his sign of his authority, touched Garby's back. "Follow my lead," the old wolf said. The young wolf kept his head down but made no response. Neshoba turned and, despite of his fatigue, began to run back the way he had come. Tonigan, as female leader, followed right behind. Garby came next. When the ever-eager Nikito drew too close to him, Garby looked back, showed his teeth, and snarled. Nikito fell back a step. Hungry and excited, the pack ran in a line. Neshoba had to work to keep the lead. Chapter 20. Casey dumped his backpack on a chair and went to get a carton of milk from the fridge, as well as a package of small chocolate-covered donuts from the grocery. "Happy birthday, Case," called Mr. Pardella, the tall, skinny man with chin whiskers who tended the store's old-fashioned mechanical register. Everybody knew everybody in Clarksville. "Thanks. Teenager, huh?" "Guess." "Here comes trouble." Casey laughed and returned to the table. When he got there, a man was standing at the post office counter talking to his mother while he mailed a small package. Casey recognized the man as Mr. Souza, an old white-haired guy who had come to retire in the valley from some East Coast city. Casey did not know much about him except that he was a birder, someone who roamed the area looking for birds, taking pictures of them with a huge lensed camera. Once Mr. Souza had come by their house asking permission to cross their land and go into the woods to look for birds. Since receiving an okay, he had often entered the forest from their place. Casey was opening the donut package when he heard his mother say, "It can't be a wolf, Kim. Must have been a large dog." Casey looked up. "That's what I thought at first," said Mr. Souza, "but the paw prints were really big. I should have taken a picture. Back beyond your place, a half mile or so. A couple of weeks ago, I could have sworn they were wolf prints." "I doubt it," Bess said. "Trust me, folks don't like wolves. Scared of them. If there was one that close, people would talk. Or worse." "Well, I'm no expert, that's for sure," Mr. Souza said. "Did see lots of Cassin's finches back there. Grosbeaks, too. Pretty birds. Oh, yes, and some ravens." Casey's mother told him the cost of his postage. With priority mail, she said it should get to Boston in 2-3 days at latest. "Thanks much," said Mr. Souza. As he passed Casey, he asked, "How's it going, Case?" But he did not stop. "Fine." Casey wanted to ask him about the paw prints. By the time he got up his nerve to do it and hurried out of the store, Mr. Souza was in his pickup truck and pulling out of the parking lot. But it had begun to snow. Casey did not care. Spring snow never lasted long. It might even turn to rain. All he could think of was that wolves often appeared in his hunting game. It would be cool to see a real one. Chapter 21. Snow was falling by the time the wolves came near the clearing. Neshoba, working against his exhaustion, was happy to halt. "Wait here," he said. The 4 other wolves held back while Neshoba crept forward. Shivering, he stood behind a bush and peered out. His paw ached. His heart was beating so loudly he wondered if the other wolves could hear it. Ears cocked, eyes wide, nose sniffing, Neshoba studied the open area. The clammy air smelled of hard cold. Tiny snowflakes drifted down slowly as if reluctant to drop. The ground was already layered with a thin veil of snow, which, in the fading dusk, seemed to glow. All was silent. There was no sign of the raven or of the elk. Neshoba stole a quick look behind. The other wolves were watching him carefully. Tonigan's eyes were worried. Garby's were sullen. Nikito and Pildown stood patiently a few steps to the rear, their breath puffy and white. Neshoba looked up. He could see no stars. The old wolf turned back to the clearing, trying to decide what to do. Where is that stupid raven? Should I wait for her? Should I try to find the elk on my own? They could be miles away by now, and this snow will be making hunting much harder.